Howdy, Outlaws. It's your old outlaw buddy, Grim Reaver Actual. And after a long stretch of waiting, that's my honor to present for your entertainment episode 2 of my Going Off Script series. In this one, we're going to wrap up chapter 1 with 3 quick missions that are honestly pretty darn restrictive and linear when it comes to trying to go off script and testing the limits of what the game will allow us to get away with. Then we're going to jump into a few chapter 2 missions, the first of which is a bit restrictive, and the second one, now that one gave me some very interesting results. So, without any further ado, I reckon we ought to spur our horses and head out on this new adventure of going off script. Let's ride. All right, Outlaws. Let's kick this episode off by exploring one of the funner missions in Chapter 1, Old Friends. In this mission, we have to ride to a O'Driscoll hideout in a place called Ewan Basin and steal their plans for robbing Leviticus Cornwall's private train car, like I mentioned before. This mission's pretty linear and restrictive, but that don't mean we can't mess around and see what all we can get away with. When we finally stop on a mountain above the O'Driscoll camp, Dutch goes over the plan with everybody. And at the same time, we're making our own plans to test the game's script, and part of Dutch's grand plan is to make our way down to the edge of the hideout and into position. Then, with the element of surprise firmly in our grip, we attack. Well, that's all fine and good, but we already have run this same plan over and over in all our playthroughs. So I reckon we ought to see if we can't start the fight way before we even get into the spot where Dutch wants us. Now, we tried to take the shot from way on top of the mountain, but the game won't even let us raise our rifle up. So we have to move on down the face of the mountain until we reach a spot where we can get a shot off. And the whole time we're making our way down, Dutch is trying to coax us back onto the path that he's on, which heads down into the basin and into position. The first spot we make it to still ain't quite letting us shoot. So we gotta move a bit further down. Finally, after a surprisingly easy walk down, we find the perfect spot, take careful aim, and then all hell breaks loose and Dutch ain't too happy with us. As we run to join the fight, we don't exactly make it down gracefully, but we're hard-riding outlaws. So we shrug it off and go kill us some O'Driscolls. The fight down in Ewan Basin is really straightforward and pretty much turns out exactly the same every time. So let's skip ahead to when we try to start the fight early from a different spot. Now this is a much better spot to take the shot from. Yes, I know I missed the first shot. What matters most is that I didn't miss the next one and I accomplished what I set out to do. Start the fight early. After the fighting is over, and after you killed a mess of O'Driscoll boys, Micah finds some plans and we find some dynamite. Dutch says something about how he loves it when a plan comes together, and then we all ride back to Coulter so Dutch can plan the perfect train robbery. On the way back, we catch Kieran, hog-tie that cur, and then stow him on our horse like the worthless carcass he is. But before we take him back to Coulter, we can exploit the mission state and ride around the immediate area collecting valerian root, ginseng elixir, and aged pirate rum to max out our stats before heading into Chapter 2. But that's a video for another time, my friends. After we're done riding all over the place gathering tonics and such, we take Kieran back to Coulter, make the proper introductions, and that pretty much wraps up that mission. A few days later, we leave camp and head down out of them mountains to answer a question that also happens to be the name of the mission. Dutch's plan is simple: blow up the trestle, derail the train, kill anyone who gets in our way, and rob Cornwall's private train car. Just like the rest of the missions in Chapter 1, this mission is also pretty restrictive and don't allow very much deviation. That being said, there is something that we can do that's kind of funny. We can blow up old Bill Williamson as many times as we want. When the game lets us target the dynamite, well, we're almost obligated to shoot it, right? Now, I gotta admit, taking the shot from up here on the cliff surprised me because the weapon reticle didn't turn red. In fact, because I didn't have a scope, I was just aiming at where I thought the dynamite was. You know, the funniest thing is what the fail screen says. It don't say you attacked Bill like the first time. No, instead, it tells us that we failed because we set off the dynamite. Now, I did this twice, from the cliff, and once down near Bill. And the odd thing was, the game said that I set off the dynamite instead of you attacked Bill. Now, how weird is that? Unfortunately for us, blowing up Bill was the only real experiment that the game lets us get away with. But that's fine with me. I ain't saying that I don't like Bill. However, in my mind, there ain't nothing wrong with a little preemptive revenge for what he allows to happen to John in the future. The rest of this mission goes the same as it always does on my playthroughs, with very little room for variation, let alone testing the boundaries of the game's scripting. And that's how it's supposed to be. All you hard-hitting outlaws know just as well as I do that Chapter 1 is not much more than a well-designed tutorial, and the ending of this one leads us straight into what I would argue is without a doubt the most restrictive mission in the game. My friends, on your next playthrough, I highly recommend that you don't even bother trying to deviate from the route that the game wants you to take. I tried to, and about 5 seconds later, the mission failed. Simply put, Eastward Bound is all about the gang's move from Coulter to Horseshoe Overlook. It's designed to give the player some exposition and set up the rest of the story. And once we get to Horseshoe Overlook and we're able to free roam, we can finally try to get some real going off script moments. When it comes to the first couple of missions in Chapter 2, I tried a bunch of different ideas to see what Rockstar would actually let us get away with. The first mission's one I always start with when I'm done gathering gold, talismans, trinkets, tonics, and my top 4 favorite guns for free. I like this mission because it's our first story-driven journey out into the world of Red Dead Redemption 2. And what better place to do that than Valentine? Once we got ourselves parked, the girls took off to go and see what kind of mischief they can get into. Meanwhile, we have to follow Uncle over to the general store. Or do we? One of the things I noticed right away was that all the shop icons appeared active on the minimap. So I decided to make Uncle wait outside the store while I went ahead and checked them out. I quickly discovered that we can enter them and look around, but the shop owners ain't there, and we can't interact with anything that's on the shelves. Well, amazingly, there is one shop besides the general store that you can go into and actually buy and sell things. Dr. Calloway's office, a few doors down from the sheriff. The fact that we can go in here to buy and sell items during this fairly limited mission ain't nothing short of fantastic. Anyways, I reckon we kept old Uncle waiting long enough. After getting whiskey for Uncle and a cutscene, we have to rescue Tilly and Karen from 2 no-good sumbitches. And after making sure that them girls was okay, we have an issue with the man from Blackwater, also known as Jimmy Brooks. We borrow a horse and give chase. And then I tried something that I never really thought of till that moment. Why can't we just shoot Jimmy when he's running away? Well, that fail screen says it all, don't it? The man from Blackwater was killed. I know. It don't make much sense at first because we can kill him when he's hanging off the cliff, but I understand why Rockstar did this. They want us to make a moral choice. In fact, it's the first moral choice we're forced to make in the entire game. So, I restarted the checkpoint and went through the different options we have when dealing with Jimmy. We can help him up and save him, or step on his hands and kill him. You know, the usual. However, you all might be surprised to find out that there are actually 2 more things you can do. We can shoot him in the head, and even more surprising, we can wait. And after hanging on for 45 seconds, Jimmy's arms finally give out, and he falls to his death. And with Jimmy's untimely demise, that's polite society, Valentine style, done and dusted. And now, my outlaw friends, we can finally get into the mission that I found to be the most interesting when it comes to going off script. Now, before I get wrongly accused of murdering Reverend Swanson, I reckon we ought to go back to where this all started. After saving the good preacher from getting turned into a warm red mist by a fast-moving locomotive, I took the poor wretch back to Horseshoe Overlook so he could recover from his morphine and alcohol-induced stupor. When I took him down off my horse, I got the prompt that said, "Drop Reverend Swanson off in his bed." Well, friends, this series ain't called Do What the Game Tells You, so I decided to see what all I could do with this half-dead, morally bankrupt man of the cloth. My first instinct was to see if I could put him down anywhere else in camp. I reckoned that the good Reverend might want to warm up by the fire, or in it. But the game wasn't obliging me with that idea one iota. In fact, it weren't giving me any options whatsoever to drop him any place that ain't his bed. Well, I'd rather be healed and hided to a barn door before I give up trying to go off script. So I did the most rational thing I could think of. I tried to get him off my back by any means necessary. My first try was a poor attempt at solving this problem, but the second one, well, that worked perfect. I gotta tell you, Outlaws, seeing how bad Arthur got banged up and how Swanson didn't even stir after falling from that height, I'd be lying if I said that didn't give your old outlaw buddy some great ideas. I called my horse over and stowed the comatose preacher on it and headed on over to the cliffs near Painted Sky. The fact that Swanson could fall that far and not take any damage at all helped me form a theory that in this particular mission state, the preacher man might just be invulnerable. So naturally, I figured that the only way to test this theory was to drop him from an even greater height and see if it don't kill him. As you all can see, he survived what I estimate to be a 60 to 80 foot drop. I mean, dear Lord, look at the prompt the game has given me. With my theory seemingly confirmed, I decided to take the wayward preacher over to the massive bridge that spans Bard's Crossing and push my theory and the game's logic to the absolute limit. And, well, you already know how that turned out. But that's all right, my outlaw friends, 'cause you already know that I ain't done yet. Given my current location on the map, I got the bright idea to head on into the hostile territory where we're wanted, dead or alive, and see if the half-dead Reverend Swanson can do the same thing as the famous legendary buck meat armor exploit. No, I ain't talking about wearing the preacher like meat armor. I just wanted to find out if his comatose state and our mission objective affects anything down here in what I call the red zone of death. I gotta admit, when I crossed into this forbidden land, I was expecting to have bounty hunters on my behind like stink on a dead skunk, or be picked off by the invisible sniper. Much to my surprise, none of that happened. Let me tell you, friends, I damn near covered this entire section of the map, except for Blackwater. If you all decide to give this a try, I highly recommend that you avoid going anywhere near there, unless you want the law on you in a heartbeat. And while I'm on the subject, the invisible sniper is still quite active and will most definitely kill Arthur or Swanson if you try to cross the river into New Austin. All that bad stuff aside, I was truly amazed at what I was able to do down here with old Swanson slung across my horse's behind like a deer carcass. I camped overnight up in tall trees, paid a visit to the trapper, went to Manzanita Post, and got the Siberian Husky into the compendium, and a whole lot more. I also did some hunting and was absolutely tickled when the game let me replace the poor Reverend with a bison pelt. Yes, indeed, my friends. To me, this was a fine little discovery. Well, I reckon I ought to get this poor drug-addled preacher back to camp, into his bed, and call this here episode done and dusted. Well, Outlaws, I truly hope that y'all enjoyed this episode and that the results of my going off script this time were surprising and entertaining. I'm so very glad to have you hard-hitting Outlaws ride with me. And if you like this kind of content, please leave a like, a comment, and if you'd be so kind, please consider subscribing. I'm truly grateful and humbled by your support, and I hope that y'all join me again in the next episode. And until then, take care of your horses and keep them guns clean. Outlaws for life.